Dixie here. Today I want to talk to you about backpacking gear, but kind of in a different way. I want to tell you about some common backpacking gear that I have never bought, don't have any plans to, and why. The first gear item that I would never buy is a JetBoil stove. I feel like when people first get into the world of backpacking and they start doing some research on different gear items, when they decide to purchase a stove, it's almost like JetBoil is their go-to. And it does make sense because JetBoil is kind of an all-in-one, so it's very simple and convenient. It's got the pot and the burner and everything that you need. Also, it is really stable, so you don't have to worry about the pot sliding off of the stove and spilling your dinner. And it's really good at boiling water very quickly. I haven't looked at all the boil times, but I would hazard a guess that it is probably the fastest stove to boil water out there. So what is the drawback that makes me not want to purchase this? The weight. The JetBoils are just on the heavier side of things, and when you're trying to shave weight from your pack, this is an easy spot to do it. My kitchen setup that I use for years is the BRS stove, which is less than an ounce, and my Stanco grease pot is about 3.4 ounces, so you're looking at just under 4.4 ounces for my whole setup. So the most lightweight JetBoil on the market right now, the Stash, is 7.1 ounces. That's almost double what my setup has been. And that stove wasn't even on the market when I first started backpacking back in 2015. So the JetBoil has just never really been on my radar. And I don't foresee that happening anytime soon. Next on my list of things I would never buy is a metal cup. You probably have seen folks walking around with a metal cup carabinered to their pack, just clanking about, and I just wouldn't want one, especially dangling on the outside of my pack. They're big and clunky and they take up a lot of space if you try to pack them in your pack. And then actually when you're using it, I like to drink hot drinks if I'm gonna have like a separate designated drink that's not in my water bottle. And the metal cup, it gets really hot when you're trying to hold it. So I like the Sea to Summit silicone collapsible cup. They make other brands. You can even get them at Walmart, but that's just more realistic to me because it takes up less space. It is not burning hot when you hold it. And then my Sea to Summit cup actually has like graduated tick marks in there. So if you're cooking different meals, then you've got a way to measure your water. Next up, a Nalgene bottle. Nalgenes are super cool to put stickers on places that you visit and stuff, but they're just not practical to me on trail. They're much heavier than what I go with, which is I've used mostly smart water bottles while backpacking because they pair well with my Sawyer Squeeze and I can just drink right through the Sawyer Squeeze. But even if you do something like a water bladder, there are a lot of lightweight options that just pack up well, they take up less space, and they're more lightweight than a Nalgene bottle. But the biggest turnoff for Nalgene, in my opinion, is that it doesn't pair with filters, so you can't like squeeze water through it, drink through it, and all of that. You could stick a life straw down in there, but just not super convenient in my opinion. I guess I should put fine print here because somebody will be like, actually you have purchased an Nalgene because you use them on Kilimanjaro. Yes, I did, but that's because you're basically forced to. You cannot use disposable water bottles like Smart Waters and things like that on the mountain because they're trying to reduce waste. So technically I have purchased one before, but I would never take it backpacking. And I wouldn't have if I didn't have to. Next up, a freestanding tent. Like many of the other gear items I've listed in this video, it's just too heavy when there are more lightweight options out there. While there is a lot of stability with it, I like having dual purpose items. So I like using a tent that sets up using trekking poles because I carry trekking poles anyway, so it saves me that weight. And oftentimes you can get trekking pole tents that are made out of more lightweight materials, but that's kind of going down a different rabbit hole. My first backpacking tent was a semi-freestanding tent, so I had to stake out the corners and the vestibule to make it all functional, but I wouldn't even buy one of those going forward unless for some reason I had to have a tent for like super blizzardous conditions, or you know, if I was going on some certain expedition that had a lot of snow or weather that required a freestanding or a semi-freestanding tent. But for 3-season weather backpacking in the US, it's just really overkill in my opinion. But even in that instance, I would probably look at renting a freestanding tent before I would actually purchase one. Next up is a collapsible camp chair. I do think that these are probably really nice. I have seen people using them, and I'm not gonna lie that I haven't been envious at camp, but it's just not something that I would ever seek out and purchase to carry as my luxury item, because I found some really nice logs and rocks to sit on, or I don't mind plopping down on the ground and leaning up against a tree. But if you're just somebody who doesn't really enjoy like getting down on the ground and having to get back up, then you know, a camp chair might be totally worth it to you. And they do make some, if I'm not mistaken, probably like just under a pound these days, but it's just not worth that weight to me.
What is this?
Oh, CPR mask.
Just breathe on it, dude.
No!
Next up is a pre-made first aid kit. They're just way too heavy and have too many things that are not gonna be useful. Pretty much on trail, I have found, now everyone has different levels of what they're comfortable with, but if I have a bandana and I've got some duct tape, then I can fashion, you know, to cover a wound or something until I get to town. Because I'm gonna tell you what, Band-Aids do not stick. They will come right off. And really, if there's anything more serious than what you can treat with a cleanish bandana and some duct tape, then you're probably gonna have to call search and rescue. I do also include a needle for popping blisters if I need to, but it has a dual purpose of being in my repair kit, and I like to take some ibuprofen and some anti-diarrheal, but that's pretty much it for my first aid kit. Gaiters. I had a pair of these on the Pacific Crest Trail, but I did not purchase them. They just are one extra thing to fuss with, in my opinion. I like to stop on breaks and at lunch and take my shoes and socks off, and then also having to like deal with hooking up gaiters. It's just, it's too fussy for me, and I didn't really notice a big difference on debris in my shoe with or without them. I thought in the desert that they would be super helpful because it was going to be really sandy, but I think it has more to do with your gait than anything if you're going to be slinging stuff up in your shoes. And some people have a gait where they throw stuff up in their shoes, and it really is helpful to them to have the gaiters, but I just didn't find that it was for me. So if you're somebody who goes hiking, day hiking, and you're looking at getting into backpacking and you're like, oh, well, I have to have some gaiters now, unless you find yourself stopping a lot to take your shoes off and dump crud out of them, then you probably don't need gaiters. Inflatable pillows. This is one that some people are either like totally sold by them or they just don't need them, and I'm in the category of I just don't need it. Now, yes, I have actually purchased some of these in the past to test, because on the channel I like to get familiar with a bunch of different gear items so I'm more knowledgeable, not necessarily because it's really something that I need, right? So the inflatable pillows are one of those things. I tried them, was not impressed, didn't really think I would be, to be honest. In normal life, I'm just not a huge pillow person. I'm like the person who likes the flattest pillows, and sometimes I even push that aside and just sleep on a mattress. So for me, having the added weight for something that's just kind of awkward, it just doesn't work out. So I like, again, dual purpose items. I use a Z-Pack stuff sack for my clothes bag, and I get the one that has the fuzzy lining on the inside, so I can just turn it inside out, put my extra clothes in there, and it works as like a nice little flat pillow. Next is an electric pump for air mattresses. Again, this is one of those things that people either swear by or it's just not worth it to them. And I have such a short sleeping pad that it just doesn't take a whole lot of energy to blow it up. So even though you can get some of these pumps, inflators for just a few ounces, for me, it's not worth spending the money or, you know, carrying the extra weight. But if you've got one of those really long, wide sleeping pads and you find yourself, you know, hyperventilating, trying to blow it up, then this really might be the ticket for you. Last but not least is an alcohol stove. This is something that I actually considered when I was starting my thru hike of the Appalachian Trail, but it made me a little bit nervous thinking about having to estimate how much fuel I would use to cook with, because you pour your alcohol in to start with. And also I wanted to have a flame that was adjustable because I knew I might want to cook things a little bit differently. So with an alcohol stove, you just have flame. There really is no adjusting it. So anyway, this is just one of those personal preference things, but I just will never have an alcohol stove. All right, y'all, well, that is all I have for you today. If you have some popular backpacking gear items that you've just never really been interested in purchasing, and you would like to share why, I would love to hear those in the comments below. And just as a side note, next week I'm going to talk about some of the backpacking gear items that I have ditched along the way. Thank y'all so much for watching. If you found this video useful, don't forget to share it with a friend, and we will see y'all next time.